Hello, and welcome to another Living Life Ministry video. Today we're going to be talking about the Advent season. And I'm sure you've heard that term before, Advent. For most people, when they hear the term Advent, it is referring to the holidays, and it's usually referred to those chocolate calendars you can get at the store, where every day leading up to Christmas, there's a chocolate behind a little window, or there's a toy, or something like that. And a lot of parents get this for their children. And sadly, to an extent, that's all they really hear about the term Advent. Um, and as someone who's preaching a message of the gospel and of Christ, I thought it would be a good idea to give a little background on the term Advent and the Advent season, because everybody celebrates Christmas, but a lot of people don't recognize um, the 4 weeks before Christmas Day, that preparation, that anticipation for Christmas Day, and what that really means. So I'm going to give you some background information on the term Advent and the Advent season, and just to help you reflect in your time, because there's after the American Thanksgiving, Christmas really kind of gets thrown at us by the media and the corporations and people trying to sell products, and it's the shopping season for a lot of people, and it starts that early now because of the rush of buying presents. But traditionally, the Christmas and holiday season always started right after that point. That 4 weeks leading up to Christmas is the Advent season. It is the time of preparation for the day of Christ's birth. So now, when the reason I want to give you this information is so when that season starts, a lot of people, all of a sudden they're getting flooded with these commercials, and they start stressing out. They start thinking about finances. They start thinking about money, and they're like, oh no, it's too soon for Christmas. I always hear that all the time. People are like, oh, I don't want to deal with this right now. Christmas, let's just leave Christmas till the week before, and they get stressed out. And it's a moment. The Advent season is supposed to be something of celebration and anticipation and excitement. And so I want to give you the background so that when you start seeing those commercials, you don't go, oh, you can be like, oh yeah, it's the Advent season. The Advent calendar is started, and I can start celebrating it in my own light and in my personal life and in my community in a new sense, not something that's so commercialized and flooded with worries and stress about money. So, to begin, let's talk about the word Advent. Advent comes from the meaning of coming or arrival. So when we talk about the Advent season, it is a season of waiting for the coming and arrival of Christ. And we do that in celebrating two moments. The more well-known one is the birth of Jesus, the birth of Christ, and the revelation of God through Jesus Christ on Christmas Day. And so we are anticipating that birth. We are waiting for that moment where God's light is revealed to us through the birth of Christ. And the second way that we are, waiting for the arrival is waiting for the return of Christ. So it's a future element, and so it's kind of almost the contrast. Like we celebrate and we anticipate the birth of Jesus, and we also celebrate and anticipate the return of Jesus. And all of this is done in our present moment. So we're honoring the past, and we're honoring the future. We're celebrating the past, we're celebrating the future. We're anticipating the past, and we're anticipating the future. So the Advent season and the Christmas holiday is a union of the past, the present, the future under God and under Christ, and it's a very beautiful thing. In the moment when you're taking that time to remember and anticipate, you're taking all of that human emotion of celebration and combining it into one. You're having that celebration of memory of that past event, that glory, and all those wonderful things, and you're tying it into something that you're anticipating in the future, and you're celebrating it in the moment, and you're embracing it in the moment. So the Advent season, the Advent calendar, is a very powerful time in the Christian tradition and in the church, because it takes community to a whole new level. You remember the past, the present, and the future. The second thing I want to talk about is the spirit of Advent. And if you watch a lot of movies, you always hear talk about the spirit of Christmas, and with that comes people increase their love and their charity and good deeds and whatnot. And a great example is the Christmas Carol, and where Scrooge learns how to be charitable, how to love his neighbor, and transform himself from that hidden, sheltered, angry man into that loving, charitable, caring person. And the spirit of Christmas is often associated with that transformation from everyday life into that giving and that loving nature. But where that kind of comes from and is related to is the spirit of Advent. And the spirit of Advent is associated with kind of four ideas: expectation, anticipation, preparation, and longing. And with that being said, when you're anticipating the coming of Christ through the birth and the return, and you're longing for that, you want that, your attitude changes. You're doing a celebration in that tradition. And the preparation is the most interesting one for me, because in the Bible, there's a passage where Jesus is trying to explain the kingdom of heaven, and he kind of makes a comparison to servants who are working for their master, and their master goes away. And Jesus is talking about the people who will experience the King of Heaven, who will be allowed to enter those gates, basically, are the ones who keep working when the master's away. They're the ones who keep their studious attitude to what they're supposed to be doing, even though the master's not there to keep them in line. The ones who don't receive that kingdom of heaven are the ones who kind of slack off and are like, oh, the master's not here, I can take a break, I'm going to sit down, I'm not going to do my work. I'm not going to do what I'm supposed to do. Now, when it comes to us, our preparation for the Advent season is to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. We need to be doing our duties as good people. We need to be doing charities. We need to be taking care of the poor. We need to be, being nice and kind and sharing those gifts of faith, hope, and love with the community. So in anticipation, we prepare ourselves for the return of the master, or the return of the king kind of thing. And by, becoming and amplifying our better behavior. And the hope of the Advent season, I would say, is to, try to keep that all year round. And, in the Advent season, we're reminded of these things through that anticipation. And I think the hope of it is that we keep that good and moral structure that we build up within ourselves during the holiday season for all year. Another spirit of Advent, the spirit of the Advent season works differently for some people. And a lot of the other Christian traditions, like the more streamlined, is that anticipation and excitement for the coming of Christ. But in other churches, in some of the Eastern Orthodox traditions and other groups, the Advent season and the Christmas holiday is a time for penance and, being remorseful for your sins and fasting and, taking a look at yourself and saying, okay, what do I need to do to make myself better? And it's the same sort of principle. And when you get excited and you do that preparation in the other form of Christianity where, people get excited, they're bettering themselves in a more, I would say, outgoing fashion. And for the other Christians, they kind of do it in a more reserved, kind of quiet, reflective state. And in both ways is a very beautiful, and in all truth and honesty, in my opinion, I think you need to do both. Christmas is a time where you can sing loudly, for everybody to hear out in the streets and, sing Christmas carols and celebrate and try to spread that love. But at the same time, when you're home with your family or just with yourself, it's a good time to reflect and say, am I doing what, God would expect of me? Am I doing something that would make, the heavens proud with? It's a good time to reflect. It's a really good time to reflect. And that's kind of the spirit of the Christmas season, the Advent season, is that change in someone's soul and that revival of all those good things, and with the hope that you'll continue them throughout the year. So the next thing I want to talk is more about the symbols of the holiday season and the Advent season. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is colors. Now, historically, the colors of Christmas and the Advent season aren't green, red, and white. They're actually purple. And purple is still used by some of the churches of the world. The Roman Catholic Church often still uses purple, and so do some of the Protestant churches. And a lot of the Protestant churches have moved away from purple and use blues now, the color blue, and sometimes it can be kind of like a soft blue, a royal blue, or a dark blue. And more traditionally, for the Protestant churches, the dark blue is representing the anticipation element and looking up at the night sky. The dark blue is supposed to represent the night sky, and that waiting for the Christ to come down and to be revealed. And there's a lot of stories in the Bible specifically the nativity stories, where they look for the star in the sky and it leads them to the manger, right? So this kind of ties in with the biblical story and that longing and anticipation. Now, the red and green actually comes from European traditions in the past, where the Europeans would use evergreens and hollies to symbolize everlasting life. Evergreens, of course, survive the winter. They're not like the leaf trees that kind of go dormant and their leaves fall off and they go to almost like a hibernative state. Evergreens keep their green all year round. So when you're celebrating eternal life of God and Christ, it's a really good symbol. And hollies are the other ones. So I'm sure you've seen hollies. They have the little red holly berry things and the green leaves. So the red and green come from those traditions of celebrating Christmas. Another symbol is candles. And there's so much information on the candles that are used in church services and stuff like that. And I'll leave that for you guys to check out on the internet. It's really kind of cool how different churches have different traditions. But generally, the candles represent the light that Christ is revealing, that God reveals through Christ, through his birth and his life and his death and his resurrection and his return. And so it's a symbol for the whole encompassing story of Christ, but more specifically that moment when he's born and that light is revealed. And there's also the candles can represent the time waiting, the centuries between the history and the coming of Christ. There's a lot of different stories behind that, so I'll let you check that out. It can there's stories based on the colors of the candles and where their candles are positioned. It's really kind of neat. So if you want to learn a little bit more about that, I'll leave that to you. Also like to say, going back to the evergreens, the hollies, and the traditions that the Europeans brought in that relate to Christmas. A lot of you will notice as it gets closer to Christmas, people put Christmas wreaths up on their doors. And the Christmas wreaths actually have to do with thinking about God and his endlessness and his eternal light and glory, and how God has no beginning or end, just like the wreath. It's a circle, right? And the green, coming from that European tradition of representing the everlasting life, with the circle, really represents God and what the holidays that are standing for, and that revelation of the truth. So the evergreens come from our Advent wreaths, are traditionally what they're called in the church, and we call them Christmas wreaths a lot of the time. But it is that symbol of everlasting life through Christ and the eternal and the never-ending existence of God. So it's really kind of a neat symbol. The final thing I kind of want to talk about is how the general public and the secular community celebrate the Advent season. Now, traditionally, a lot of people go out and buy those chocolate calendars, and that's a great way to get kids involved, but make sure you let them know what it's really celebrating. It's the anticipation for the birth of Christ and, the presents. A lot of people think it's, waiting for Santa to come, but those calendars come from the story. And finally, when you're celebrating your holiday, do it in any way you can. It's the Advent season. Try charity, singing, gift giving, and being a good person. So I really hope this helped you out in learning a little bit more. Keep the Advent season the best you can, and God bless. Goodbye.